Welcome back to Unbound Being. Today I wanted to speak about the three modes of conversation or communication, the three modes really in which we, or for which we communicate. And this is a very essential part of the divine life, the spiritual life, the life which is intent on freeing yourself from the ego structure, from the mental, historical, 4D space and time mentality or level of being, this level in which most people are now stuck, or at least those that are stuck and are unhappy with it, that are trying to free themselves from this, should understand the three modes in which most humans communicate. It can turn into a blend of them, but generally speaking there's three modes. One, the first mode, which is a legitimate mode, which is the mode that has to do with the practicality of existence. So in other words, whether you're in your family or at work, you're dealing with practical applications for communication. So you may say something in the family like, hey, tonight I'm going to cook, but there's no butter. Could you, are you going to go pick up the kids? And on the way back, could you pick up some butter while you're at it? Practical things like that. Or hey, did you put the wash out yet? Because it needs to dry and I need my shirt tomorrow when I go to that meeting, or something like that. And this practical reason for communicating with somebody is essential, and it is a necessity, and it is okay. It's a legitimate form of communication. And this can go all the way up into businesses where you're having business meetings about practical things. Now, of course, most businesses on earth are not in the business of truth and are really in the business of diversions. And so we could say that even when it comes to business, most of these things are unnecessary if we were to be surrendered to the divine, and instead of living identified with the human mind and emotions, which cause the rat race, and most activities on earth are nothing but diversions and distractions. So that's one thing. That's one mode of communication. The second mode of communication, and also a legitimate way of communicating, a reason to be speaking, is speaking of truth. Now this very rarely happens. It only happens for the gurus, the teachers, the masters, the sages, the ones that are having satsang, and the people that are involved in every time they communicate, if it's not practical, that it is meant to point back to the true nature of who we really are. So in other words, words, descriptive words, language, used only and merely as a tool to point back towards the wordless state. This is where words are a massaging of this fake realm of persona and identity and ego structure, and massaging that out, and therefore pointing, all the words really are pointing back towards no words, to the state of emptiness and silence, the state of the fifth dimensional consciousness of being, presence, awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, but basically being, the fifth dimensional state of being. Those two, the practical one and the satsang type truth speaking, are both legitimate communication things or tools or activities, if you wish, engagements with other people, communicating with them for the reason of pointing either back to a practicality in life, or second, for a truthful pointing back towards the original state of harmony and peace and love, joy, bliss, happiness, true, godly, eternal, infinite being, right? And then there's a third version, a third communication, and this is almost now the predominant case on the earth. We really only have the first one, which is practical, and then we have this third one, which is an absolutely redundant function. And that is the function of speaking only to enforce and to reiterate, or to basically strengthen and exercise the muscles of the person. And that's the way we now see most people communicating, which is the communication which is solely intent on believing and reinforcing the persona, this identity of memory, this persona identity which believes it's a time figurine, that it's a person that lives with beliefs and opinions and ideas, and I like this and I don't like that. And most people that are now alive And you could go to any restaurant in any part of the world, and you'll find that 99% of all the conversations, unless they are about business, practical aspects of business, they are generally all about this exchange of persona, where people are just gathering so they can express themselves as a non-existent person, as this fictional identity of persona, and exchanging with each other's beliefs, and you throw at me some of your beliefs, and I'll acknowledge your beliefs, and you'll acknowledge my beliefs. We exchange some of those beliefs, but really we're only there to make sure that the false identity, the ego structure, stays in place. It is therefore an exchange of persona and identity and belief in order to reinforce the illusion of that separate self. And we, nowadays, most people in most restaurants around almost every part of the world, basically every part of the world, and is about that, which is the exchange of that. So you have three modes of communication. Two are valid, one is absolutely invalid if you're living the divine life, that is. If your life is intent on being free from the torturing, tyrannical mental mind, the mind that has now caused all the suffering on this earth, both on an individual level and a collective level, if you're intent on ridding yourself from that aspect, that false identity, that persona, right, that personality, if you're getting rid of the false and transcending towards the higher realms of the fifth dimension of truth, then it is an invalid functioning. It's an invalid activity to engage in at any level. You either are practically busy with something in your body-mind life, for your physical existence, your work, or you speak of the truth, which means you're not speaking about it, you're not theorizing about it, but you're speaking at it. It's always with the intent of inquiry, of a deeper understanding. So if you're still using words, because you can't be absolutely still and silent, then use them only to bring back and massage back and knead the clay back into truth. In other words, to point back the way home, into the silent, still place of being. The other version, the persona aspect, is absolutely invalid, and therefore will only confirm, re-establish, and enhance and strengthen the persona. And this is what most people do. They talk about themselves as this historical creature, as a body-mind that lives in time, what they did with their life, where they're going with their life, what they believe about this or that, about politics, about anything at all. They're always having this exchange to reinforce that very part which is the suffering aspect of human beings, which if you're living a spiritual life, you have to get rid of. So when you're speaking or talking or any time communicating at all, you have to see what mode you are functioning in. Are you being practical? Is your communication with the other person or group of people intent on practical action in either the private life, in the sense of the necessities of life, or business? Or is it meant on dissolving the untruth and therefore uncovering the truth? Or the last one, which is the only illegitimate way, is your conversation nothing but reinforcing this historical timeline, figurine, persona, identity, which believes itself to be an existing body, mind in time and going somewhere and having all kinds of stories and belief structures around that. So make the difference, very essential. If you want to be a vegan, you don't eat meat. If you want to be spiritual, you don't eat persona, you don't eat time, you don't gnaw and chew and continue to continuously live off of this poisonous mental, emotional, historical meat. This is poisonous meat, you know. So live what you say you want to be, but don't settle for a halfway house where you go to satsang and to truthful places and you listen to people speaking about truth, and then after that hour or 2 hours of satsang have passed, you return back to your friends and all the people that live in the persona world of that third level of exchange, which has nothing other than to reconfirm and reestablish you as that false identity of the person. You're either free or you're not. You're either intent on separating from the false or kind of living in a halfway house. But the halfway house doesn't work, and it's finally going to, you know, leave you despaired again, because it's either all or nothing. It's not some pseudo-spiritual in-between world where you can have the best of both worlds. Keep the good stuff for your person and just try to get rid of the depressive moments and the moments of worry and things like that. The mind comes, the territory of the person comes with the ups and downs. That's the very nature of duality of the person. You can't have the good times for the person and not the bad times. You'll have either no person and you're free and you're here and you're quiet in the very being of the unfoldment of the pure perception of life, which is just the unfoldment instantaneous without having to contemplate, premeditate, do any of these things. Because it's just life living through you, flowing through you, in the moment, direct experience. And so be careful about the modes of communication, the modes of conversation, the modes of engagement with other people, because there's only two legitimate modes for those who are intent on being free of the torturous, tyrannical, suffering ego mind that is the cause of all suffering on a personal and collective level.